An Ugly Truth by Sheera Frenkel and Cecilia Kang. I'm excited to review this book, but not for reasons I'm proud of. You see, there's an idea that has kept the greatest companies afloat in the last 25 to 50 years in Silicon Valley, namely, and Seattle, especially, and that's that there are two types of executives. There are missionaries who focus on, they're visionaries who focus on creating a more exciting, fulfilling, beautiful, rich life for the consumers, and obviously you need money to do that. But then you have mercenaries who are very, very focused on profits and will stay so strikingly at the expense of customers. They tend to get corrupt, and executives may turn from one to the other. I don't know that much about Facebook, so it's pretty refreshing to learn more about it from a book. Tens and maybe hundreds have been well documented of Amazon, Apple, and Google, who are known as the other three of the four most powerful companies on earth. I've heard about the other three in books like Steve Jobs, What Would Google Do?, The $1 Trillion Coach. My favorite Amazon related book used to be The Everything Store, but it might be Basonomics now. Probably one of my favorite books of all time, The Four by Scott Galloway, which is about the four companies. The name An Ugly Truth, with a blank expression of the alleged evil lizard robot himself's face, half plastered on its cover, I have to admit leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. But Facebook's growing slower than the other three, and I can't help thinking that started in 2018 when Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress about the personal data of millions being collected without consent by Cambridge Analytica, primarily for political advertising purposes. Facebook still poses itself as a company aimed toward bringing the world closer together. Why is Facebook not that well documented? Clearly they've been through a lot. What has happened? Let's talk about it. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. One former Facebook executive said that Zuckerberg's three greatest fears are Facebook getting hacked, his employees getting hurt, and that the company might one day break up because they were told to by the government. This book is a result of over 1,000 hours of interviews with over 400 executives, former and current employees, friends, classmates, advisors, and investors, 100 lawmakers and aides and privacy advocates in North America, Europe, South America, Asia, and the Middle East. Multiple people had confirmed what was documented in most cases throughout the book. It's the type of diligence, at least described, that you would expect from a reporter like Bob Woodward, for example. Are these New York Times journalists trying to get rid of Facebook or something? Let's find out. The first chapter is called Don't Poke the Bear. After the Facebook former chief security officer started at the company, they weren't sure what to do with Trump's account. They don't have to ban his language if they can find a way around it, I guess, right? I mean, he became an inescapable presence on the platform. After all, 44% of Americans at the time said that they got their news about candidates primarily from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. They spoke about the origins of Facebook in a way that made Zuckerberg sound like he was completely obsessed with storing all the information about everyone ever. When he started receiving buyout offers, and this does make sense, if he had enough money to do anything he wanted to do, he would just start another Facebook. It's interesting because Facebook is actually quite useful. Sometimes I look at my girlfriend and I forget that I met her on Facebook. I once made thousands of dollars on Facebook by reaching out to musicians and offering to mix and master their work for free. Different employees he added to the company, they did contribute to its early innovation, but the biggest contributor was easily Sheryl Sandberg, the current COO. The current coup. A coup of Facebook. Who would have known? Facebook's in the advertising business, and what separates them from Google is the kind of data that they use to advertise with. They treat ads like a funnel. Google was like the neck of the funnel, where people searched keywords to find what they were looking for. A key thing with this, though, is privacy, and Zuckerberg, he didn't think it was a problem if no one really had any privacy. Meanwhile, what struck me as odd given this is that Bill Gates, who Zuckerberg looks up to a lot, and Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they're obsessed with privacy. The next chapter is called The Rat Catcher. In the first half, you would swear listening to the audiobook that the authors were just looking for the truth. They weren't out to make Facebook look like a mischievous, secretive company that wants everything for itself and lies to everyone to keep it that way, but I couldn't really tell after that. It might have been somewhere in between, but Facebook's direct involvement with privacy, I'm afraid, might just not be operating on a very helpful premise. The next chapter is called The Warrant Canary. This one was about the Russian hackers of the 2016 election. It sounded like they were like the world's most like powerful journalists. What is a warrant canary? I mean, that sounds kind of cool, but it also sounds kind of frightening in some ways. At the turn of the 20th century, canaries were sent into coal mines. If the bird died, it was a signal that toxic gas had been released into the air and that the shaft was not safe for miners. In the mid-2000s, the name was actually repurposed by internet companies. The companies got secret government subpoenas for things that were so secret at the time that you literally couldn't even legally reveal their existence. As a workaround to alert users that data was being accessed, internet companies started putting cute little yellow canaries on their sites as a sign that all is well. Alex Stamos, the former chief security officer, became known as the warrant canary of Facebook. If the warrant canary disappeared, then it means that that company had been served one of those secret government subpoenas. If one went missing, advocates knew to look for the canary. Found a way after Trump's election to count the exact percentage of content on Facebook that was fake news. And this was, I don't think I got an exact percentage, allegedly low. It's probably huge now because I don't know, when I go on Facebook and when my girlfriend goes on Facebook, when I hear people talk about what they see on Facebook, it just doesn't seem that well regulated. And Facebook is the worst platform to be misinforming people on. If you spread misinformation anywhere, the worst place would probably be Facebook because no other platform has more people on it. I have a very strong feeling that the next true Facebook is not going to have the problems that this one does. And no other company of the four has struck such directly large-scale conflict involving the privacy of its users. If Facebook is ever replaced, this book, I will say, maybe sufficiently explained some of the reasons that would be the case. I think, at least, at some point or points amidst the chaos, Zuckerberg kept reminding the company of their new mantra at the time: company over country. Facebook had over 1.7 billion people, so no country had a higher population. He figured it was more important than any country and would ultimately leave a bigger impact than any country. Then you have delete Facebook. 2 words, Cambridge Analytica. Here, Facebook started a war that with the Privacy Act that no other large tech company did. They talked about how Cambridge Analytica got the data of almost 10 million different Facebook users and what they did with it, which, the way the authors put it, sounded directly like it was deliberately just Facebook's fault. I don't know if you saw his congressional or Senate hearings from 2018, but I found them a little enraging on both ends, really. I mean, he spent the first half of it answering questions very half-assed. On the other side, most of his answers were very quickly disrupted with more questions. But plenty of his answers were just, "I'd love to have my team follow up with you." Finally, things began to take a turn when an 84-year-old official asked him a question about how Facebook is able to sustain a business model in which users don't have to pay for anything. And Zuckerberg was like, "We sell ads, sir." The more time passed, the less it became about Facebook's inability to manage its users' data responsibly and more about lawmakers' unawareness toward how big tech works. I watched some of it and I just had to turn it off. It would be great if lawmakers in like law school, if they taught you about privacy or technology or large tech companies and how they work, or if there were a branch of government that just like specialized in software or hardware, because the big tech giants, I at least imagine, would be much easier to get through to if their operations were much more clearly understood by lawmakers and other officials. The next one, the wartime leader, may as well have been called like information war or something like that. Facebook's job was to document free expression with safety. Zuckerberg didn't believe false info should be taken down. Everyone gets things wrong, and if we were taking down people's accounts when they got a few things wrong, then that would be a hard world for giving people a voice and saying that you care about that. His solution was to have users flag the false news, enabling the platform to make that content harder to find, but a lot of what could be described as false news was debatable. Again, like Facebook's business model and its stability in the information age is just up for scrutiny and candidly for question. And the election with Trump didn't make things any easier. And the pandemic, that didn't make things easier either. And I can't help thinking that the biggest trigger of this whole series of incidents was the Russian hackers. This book was written in a type of past tense that was like, how do I put this? They wrote it as if Facebook were no longer in business. If Facebook were no longer in business, the only difference in this book would be the last chapter being called The End of Facebook. I'm just kidding. That's such a bland chapter name. I mean, to be honest, the chapters, their names are one of the coolest things about the book. From Don't Poke the Bear, to The Warrant Canary, to Coalition of the Willing, to Existential Threat. The standard oil comparison didn't surprise me regarding how they buy out competition to create this social media monopoly where they're in control of everything in the supply chain. Facebook argued that the only way to fight bad information was with good information, while presidential candidates of 2020 threatened to pose mandates on the company. It all kind of lends itself to, you can't own a monumental company and not somehow have to effectively involve yourself in politics. With political beliefs on one side and owning as much of Facebook as Zuckerberg does on the other, politically speaking, he's a little bit of an anomaly. I mean, it's kind of clear that he's not some sort of socialist, but at the same time, it's also not like he's some sort of evil Hitler zombie child who practices witchcraft and eats babies from other countries or something like that. There's still speculation that he's a robot lizard, but I'm not so sure. I mean, where's the evidence? In a year like 2021, I think that if there's anything, maybe it's the haircut. But beyond that and the shape of his mouth, I don't really see it. The beginning of this chapter, at least, was pretty gangster. So get this. In January last year, right before quarantine, Facebook was notified by the CDC about you know what. When the World Health Organization, the WHO, who knew? Like the coup. When they designated that a public health emergency on January 30th, Facebook's PR team had a blog post prepared. Within hours, they went public with a plan to remove harmful misinformation, connect people to authoritative information on the virus, and give unlimited ad credits to the World Health Organization and CDC to run public service ads about it. Facebook was the first company in Silicon Valley to issue a response. Granted, I'm sure they were probably the first company informed about it, but according to this chapter, they may have been biting into a little bit more than they could chew. In conclusion, I have to admit, I've sort of started to doubt Facebook in the last couple of years, and despite that, this book I don't think I got that much out of beyond the first half or so. It wasn't as compelling as I would have thought it was, politically speaking, because let's face it, the P word there's a lot of that stuff in this book. An Ugly Truth painted itself to me not as super blue, but definitely very blue. I hope this makes sense, but it's maybe not super anti-red, but it's definitely anti-super red. Sure, you're gonna run into books like this along your maybe journey that just lean a little bit more to one side than you would hope. The ones that do, you really only hope as a result that they're able to open your mind up at least a bit. But the consequences of how Facebook grew to its current size are interesting in the way that they were presented by Frenkel and Cang, but beyond those consequences, maybe this is just me, it wasn't very clear what we've had the opportunity to effectively learn from that history other than just what not to do, which I don't know, I found it to be a little bit of a bummer because so much research went into it, but I don't know, I digress. Quotes. Her name has become a job title. Every company we work with wants a Cheryl. It is more important to be understood than to be liked. Direction 1. I recommend this book for anyone who appreciates or is disappointed in how Facebook has been handled with the obstacles they've faced since starting up in 2004. It's worth seeing both sides of the coin here, but I wouldn't say that the authors are big fans of Facebook or Zuckerberg, so that may be something to keep in mind. Direction 2. If it sounds like I'm rushing through this, believe me, my camera's about to die. What was that accent? Direction 2. If you like this book, you might like for a more appreciative take on a tech giant's scaling and operations, Basonomics by Brian Dumaine. For a horrific view, like downright horrific, of what went wrong in probably the greatest example of corporate fraud in the history of Silicon Valley, I definitely recommend Bad Blood by John Carreyrou about former businesswoman Elizabeth Holmes and her biotech company Theranos. An Ugly Truth by Sheera Frenkel and Cecilia Kang. There is a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If you guys buy anything through the links in the description, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel and keep making these videos. Please let me know if you guys checked this book out or if you liked it. Other than that, please make sure to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification, to get a notification bell whenever I drop new videos. That would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.